All right, there he is.
David,
Hey man, sorry about being late. I appreciate your flexibility. I was on a call with a student
well, heaven forbid.
who was having a few issues and probably similar to what we're going to talk about here.
Probably, maybe we'll answer it for this person.
Yeah, yeah,
That'd be good.
yeah.
Good to see you.
So
Good to see you the other night at the show.
yeah, that was a good time. I enjoyed it.
That's fun. That's fun. Um, well, hey, let's get right into this. I wanted to um, get your perspective on things as I kind of keep adding to the library of good creative people here from Milwaukee and hopefully across America and the world, as it were, to help students, climbers, and frankly, anybody who takes the business seriously and wants to kind of keep moving up the ladder, or for some of us, when decided I didn't want to be in somebody else's agency, I wanted to take a shot at running my own. So I think all of those things are very possible here. In the start, you've had a great career, and in many ways, I think a whole bunch of people would, at least on paper, want to be you. They see successful copywriter, ran his own agency, lots of awards, all that sort of stuff, and now teaching at a university. Does it get any better?
Well, I won't lie to you. It's been a great career. It's been a great 30 plus years. The weird thing is so much of it wasn't planned.
Yeah,
You know, it's just like sort of these opportunities just sort of present themselves. And I think a lot of people that I know of will have these things slap them in the face and they just sometimes they ignore them. They don't even know what it means or maybe they can't recognize an opportunity.
sure.
Um, it's I'm reminded of the old joke about the guy who prayed every day to win the lottery. Dear God, help me win the lottery. Dear God, help me win the lottery. And finally, God answers him. One day, he finally answers him and says, I'd be happy to help you, but you have to buy a ticket. Right. So there are certain things we have to do on our own. Like things aren't just going to be given to us. But at the same time, um, you know, I've always been somebody who just tries to find opportunities and utilize them, leverage them as best I can and best I could. And sometimes they may not be the ultimate destination. They might just be a stepping stone to that destination. Like it's the old idea of, well, I'll take this job because it's going to look good on a resume, which sounds almost cliched and we've all heard it throughout our careers, but there really have been a lot of jobs I've taken that look good on a resume and they did lead to something else.
Right.
Um, and sometimes it represented an inconvenience to me at the time. But if I'm not going to be here forever,
Yeah.
and I was working on good accounts or what have you, um, and so much of every agency it has to do with the people.
Yeah. I think we've, what I've already in discussing with a few others, it's sort of amazing, and that a consistent thread for everyone is, when you were 23 or 25 or even 27, you had an idea of where your career, the trajectory of where it was going to go, and the moonshot where you were going to land. And then you realized instead of from A to B, you went through C, D, E, and F, and maybe you never got back to B, to B. And it's all okay, you know,
Right.
uh, that it works out. I think if you got that sort of sponge-like attitude that I'm just going to take this stuff on and do the best that you can.
That's a great point, and it's true. I've also found that, and young people hate to hear this, but a lot of it is, sometimes you're just lucky,
Yeah,
but you also make your own luck. I'll go back to my early days. So I teach at Marquette now, but I also went there. So it's sort of surreal to be in teaching in some of the classrooms that I took
What
classes.
was your major at Marquette?
It was well, I could go back just a tad before that. I when I graduated after high school, I wanted to be a fireman.
Okay.
So I took the fire test. I was at the fire academy here in Milwaukee, and
Why a
um,
fireman? My
I
3-year-old son told me I want to be a fireman. And I said, why? He said, because I get to practice being a fireman. Like, okay, go for it. Go for it.
well, in some respects, you could make the argument that being in advertising is like being a fireman too, right?
Well,
Because
there's a few fires to put out. Like,
yeah, we absolutely are putting fires out left and right. But I at 18, the world is it's very simple. And it's like, wow, I mean, it would be a job I would never be bored at.
yeah.
I love the uncertainty and the excitement of it, the physicality of it. Um,
Were you a decent student in high school?
Very average,
Okay.
yeah. Um, but also I was an athlete, so I thought, well, I can handle firefighting. But I also Mike, here's the other thing that like really tipped the scales for me. The job was you work 24 and you're off 48.
Yeah.
So I thought being a fireman and owning a bar would be
Perfect.
that would just be the best
Yeah.
life. So that was, I mean, that's where the bar was, right?
Okay.
Anyway, so
So how do you make the shift from putting your life in peril for, 16 minutes versus, no, I think I'll do this ad stuff. That sounds pretty good too.
well, here's how it happened. I'll try not to bore you with the story, but it was to a point where it, it was going to just take me far, far, far too long to be called up. Now, this was back in the days where before there were HIPAA rules and stuff.
Hmm.
So you could see where you were on the wait list,
Yeah.
and it just wasn't moving, and it wasn't moving, and I was just like, oh my God. At the, and maybe you'd move up like everybody, we'd move up a little, but it was like, this is going to take 5 years at the
Yeah.
most, or I should say at the least. So I was, one day I saw Newsweek magazine and they had a cover story about the top jobs of the future. And this was happening like right at the same time. And there was a career called the systems analyst. Well, I didn't know what it was. I knew it was computer science. I thought computers were kind of cool.
Yeah.
So I discovered that Marquette had a major. You could major as a systems analyst. It was in the math department.
Okay.
Well, if anybody who's listening to this knows me, they know mathematics is not my
Oh, that
strong.
was that your strong suit?
Oh God. So I didn't, no, it's computers. I enrolled and I was so miserable. It was awful. I was like, I think I had a D average going into, after the first year. I just literally couldn't get this stuff. And interestingly, my brother was in one of the classes with me.
Okay.
And I was talking to him about it one day and he just said, yeah, this stuff's so easy. I'm like, how do you
Yeah.
now, not surprisingly, he became an engineer, so it's like
Yeah.
it's just that left side of my
Brain is
brain,
wired a certain way to
right?
grab it.
So I ran into a friend on campus one day and she told me she was an ad major. And I said, wait, you can get a degree in that? She said, yeah, it's in the College of Journalism at the time. Now it's the College of Communications.
Okay.
And I looked into that. I totally switched my major. My grades went like this. I mean, everything changed. And it took a copywriting class, maybe my junior year, that I finally clicked, like, because there's so many disciplines in our industry.
Yep.
And for me, it was like, oh, that's it. That's what I want to do.
And can I mean literally, can you point to a text, assignment, a person that that click did happen?
Well, yeah, guys, it was an instructor. His name was David Wesson, and he taught a copywriting class.
Okay.
Because at the time, I mean, I've always sort of liked people and I've always been a people person. And I thought, well, maybe an account executive would be fun,
Sure.
but until I took that copywriting class, I didn't really know what I wanted to do.
Were you in hindsight though, were you a kid writing stories in school and some of that stuff or no?
Well, okay, so the answer is yes. I was always writing and just like coming up with stories, like making stories up and stuff. But what's so interesting, and this is a God's honest truth. When I was in fifth grade, I had an idea for a TV spot, and it was for Frosted Flakes. I still remember this. I'm not making this up, and it's actually not a bad commercial.
Okay.
So I got my mom's manual typewriter, and I literally wrote the whole idea, and I sent it off to Kellogg's.
No kidding.
And I remember it. It was so picture this: Tony the Tiger getting out of a limo in Vegas outside of a casino.
You had me at Vegas.
And he comes out of the limo and there's paparazzi there and he's waving at everybody and he's comes walking into a casino and he puts a quarter in a slot machine and he pulls the slot machine and it comes up Tony the Tiger, Tony the Tiger, Tony the Tiger. Well, back in the old days, like the slot machine, like when you won, like
Yeah.
if you won really big, that money was, and,
Spits right
and
out of it.
do you remember the casinos had these bowls for the
Yeah.
money?
Yeah. You'd have to catch it.
Right. So instead of money, it was Frosted
Frosted
Flakes.
Flakes.
And so they're just filling these bowls and they're giving them the paparazzi and everybody's like, right. And that was the spot.
Kids dream. You couldn't give me enough Frosted Flakes, right? But
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, my dad would never buy sugar cereal. We had to eat corn flakes.
oh
But then
man,
I
that
would
is a
watch him in the morning. He'd have his bowl and he would just put so much sugar.
right.
I'm like,
That is a poor substitute for Frosted Flakes. I'll tell you that much.
it's not even close. So I sent that in to Kellogg's, and if believe it or not, I got a letter back months later. I think I probably forgot about it. And this guy's like, "Thanks for your letter. We have a company called an ad agency, and it's so funny. So it wasn't like as a fifth grader, I knew I wanted to do this, but
You
I
had an
was
instinct.
reminded of it years later, like, I did this once before.
You don't still have the letter or the scribbles, do you? That is
I
a
wish,
keeper.
I wish,
And
man.
tell me when if you were the agency, if you saw that you're instantly not thinking, we got to find this kid. It might not be the ad with Tony at the casino, right, for kids, but it's like we got a kid writing ads. Tell me that kid isn't in a spot like right now.
Isn't that funny? Like, and it's so weird. I forgot all about it until I was starting to like seriously think about advertising
Yeah,
as a job as a student. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. I remember now. I had this idea years ago.
nice.
So I suppose I was destined for it, but my I want to circle back to something I said earlier, which was, being lucky, but you also make your own luck.
Yeah,
So I worked on a portfolio and I really wanted to get a job at Frankenberry Laughlin and Constable at the time, now Laughlin Constable. And I was a finalist for a summer internship, and Dennis Frankenberry sent me this letter, and I was holding my breath for weeks because he was like, "It's between you and someone else." Well, then I get this rejection letter one day, and I still remember just sitting at the kitchen table. I was bummed out. I was living at home, or maybe it was summer, I forget. And my mom walked in the room and she says, why the long face?" I'm like, oh, look at this.
Yeah.
You know, didn't hire me. They rejected me. And
They
my mom,
get
in
you.
her infinite wisdom, she's like, oh, you don't need them here. And she grabs the Morning Sentinel and she plops the paper in front of me. This is at the kitchen table. And there in the business page is this huge write-up on this little agency that's winning every award in the world called Kuro Eichenbaum. And I read the whole thing and I was like, oh my God, they're winning all these awards. And oh my God, they keep them in a bathtub because they were in this old mansion on the east side. And I was like, yeah, who needs Frankenberry? I'm sending this guy my resume. And I called and never heard from him, never got a reply. And having ultimately worked for Steve, I know how this works. He just never would answer his phone.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was kind of giving up on that, but there was a summer internship that I heard about at a local independent TV station called TV 24, and they would run primarily, um, old westerns and shoot 'em ups.
Yeah. Yeah.
Death Wish one, Death Wish two, Death Wish three, Every Dirty Harry,
Not
every
necessarily anyone's first choice on the television station.
they had a following and
Yeah.
they were a client of Steve Eichenbaum's.
Okay.
And I got an internship in their promotions department. And I honestly I thought to myself, this could be a way to meet him. It wasn't what I wanted to do
Yeah.
really, but it was like, so I had a couple other internships. And again, this is where you make your own luck. I remember just I got the yellow pages, which some people don't even know what those are. It was just
Yeah.
printed Google, right? And I called every ad agency in the yellow pages from A to Z
Okay.
and offered my services as an intern. And anyway, so that position at TV 24, they offered me the job, and I was probably, I had two other internships lined up just as a result of cold calling.
Right.
But so I took the job at TV 24. I said thanks, but no thanks to the others. And believe it or not, about a week before I was to start, the general manager, she calls me and she was just so sad and so troubled. She's like, Dave, I feel so bad. We had budget cuts and we have to cancel our intern program. And I feel so terrible. I don't know what to say. I feel like you probably already turned down any other opportunities. And yeah, she was right. And she goes, is there anything I can do? And I said, yes, call Steve Eichenbaum. He's you're his client. Would you
Right.
call him on my behalf? All I
Yeah.
want to do is
You
show him
have to
my
give this kid an internship. Have to.
right. She goes, oh, consider it done. I'm going to call him right now. She calls me back 5 minutes later. She said, I just talked to Steve. He's willing to meet you. So I went in to interview with him, and he, I tell this is back to students. Like I tell this story all the time about how here he is he's looking at my resume, okay? And he's just like this. He's just looking top to bottom, not saying a word, just going like this. He gets to the very, very bottom and he says, you like basketball? You like jazz? Because I had interests
Right.
written on the bottom of my resume. We talked about the Bucks and we talked about our favorite jazz musicians for 25 minutes. And he said, when can you start?
There you go.
And that's how I got in. It was an internship that was supposed to be in the summer and it lasted, we carried it through my senior year, fall year, and then carried it through the spring. And I was getting work in local ad award show, and was building a portfolio like, it was like I was just turbocharged.
Prior to being there, um, did you have any kind of portfolio?
Well, just the one I was building as a student,
Right.
which that I found.
Well, I mean, did you take, I mean, I assume like every other student at the time, they put in their student work. It
Yeah.
looks and sounds and acts like student work. And until somebody like you or me comes up and says, listen, you say you're a copywriter. So you know what? Just go to Vistaprint, print up a business card. It says Dave Hanneken, copywriter, and just start writing copy. How about that? Just
Well,
and
my big piece of advice for students, and I hear it all the time, they'll share their portfolio and want me to critique it,
yeah,
which I'm always happy to do. I know you do this too, Mike. You do this all the time. But I'm like, you have three ads,
yeah.
you know, why do you only have three ads? Well, these are three assignments that we had. We only got three assignments or whatever. And I'm like, listen, you have to understand something. Um, your portfolio, most of it is what you do when you're not in class. Like this is the midnight oil stuff. These are the stories that, I sound like an old fart, but and they're like, well, I don't know what to do ads on. I'm like, okay, it's a fair question. Here's my question back to you. What do you buy when you go to the grocery store? Or do you have a hobby? Do you, are you a runner? Are you like, do you play a musical instrument? Oh yeah, I play guitar. I'm like, okay, if you play guitar, let me ask you this. Do you have a preferred guitar? Oh yeah, I have a Taylor guitar. It's the best guitar. Oh really? Why is it a best guitar? Why is it better than a Gibson or a Yamaha? Oh, simple. Like the sound is just, I can't explain it, but the sound is just sort of, it's just warmer. I'm like,
Ding.
you just wrote an ad.
Yeah.
Now do two more, do three of them, do two
And give me a
more.
little, give me a baby campaign, and let's see if we could sell that.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm always telling them, I'm like, if I win a new piece of business when I was working as a creative director, we would pitch an account. They and when we would win it, they would call us and they would say, congratulations, you won the account. The next thing out of their mouth is, we need to look at a calendar and get you out here. We need you to tour our factory or meet our engineers, or because you have to become so familiar with that brand. It could be a product or it could be a service, right? Doesn't always have to be a product.
Sure.
And so I tell these students, I'm like, you're already doing that.
Yeah.
You buy things every day that you know why you buy them or why you like them, or you have things in your life, running shoes, a tennis racket. Why is a Prince better than a Wilson or whatever? Like, why you like these products? So you already have that knowledge. You don't have to do the factory tour. You can't afford it anyway. So do a campaign on these things in your life. They're all around you.
And you got this stupid thing in your pocket, and it's like you've got access to every piece of information that you could
Oh,
possibly ever need. And
100%.
and just the doing, right? You had mentioned it's like there's that old quote of when preparation meets opportunity, right? That's luck. And I think that that's right. I'm not a luck believer, but sometimes there are things. It feels like the God rays came down, and I certainly didn't expect it to happen, and then all of a sudden it does, and it does seem almost divine, or that's just the leprechaun left the pot of gold for me. Well, you still need to pick up the pot of gold and run away with it, or whatever. Maybe the little troll is going to come after you, but um, yeah. So I think for students, for climbers, I mean, the day isn't done, right? There's more that you could do if you when I don't want to sound like, sometimes you get the rah-rah stuff that is like, if you're not working your nose to the grind, believe me, I've worked, the longest I ever put in was a 42-hour day. And at the end of the 40, at 38 hours, I think I was ready for the sudden pitch that I was supposed to deliver. I was actually doing a job for Bill Eisner, and I needed to go down to the Fireside Theater guys in Fort Atkinson. I had to drive. I lived in Waukesha. I had an office in Milwaukee on Water Street, right there across from Hoffman York. And so I was ready like at 8 in the morning, and I had to be out for the 9:30 pitch. And so I just worked all the way through on the whole thing. Finally got an idea that I thought was good. Drove out there. I mean, do not drive tired. That's worse than driving drunk.
Mm.
And I make it to Fort Atkinson. I get into the thing. I make the pitch, but the room is warm. I'm
Oh,
just dying. But I make the pitch, win the business, do the thing, get in the car. I drove like to the high school and parked it and slept. I was just like, I am done. I am done. So I don't mean that everything has to be that way, but I think when the muse sort of hits you, then go with it. Just keep
yeah.
cranking, and coffee napkins and Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop and whatever else that you want to bring into bear, but get those ideas out there and get them down.
Warren Zevon said, "I'll sleep when I'm dead." Right? It's just
Yeah, we'll
like,
have plenty of time.
well, there were many times where you can't be in this business for as long as we've been in it and not have those stories where yeah, there are times you had to cancel a vacation, you had to work a weekend, you had to do several weekends. You know, it's the nature of the beast, but I think it was I don't know if it was Tom, it might have been ad legend Tom Monahan. He's owned an agency on the East Coast. I remember reading a quote of his once. He said, "Advertising is the rock and roll of the business world."
Yeah,
And I always remember that. I'm like, God, he's right. It's like if you on a list of like the cool business jobs,
yeah,
other than perhaps rock and roll, right? Being
yeah.
being a musician. But
That
it
and
was
to
like,
me, it was like it's the closest thing to Hollywood without being Hollywood, right?
mm,
At the time, the Clios and whatnot,
yeah,
the Oscars, and but when you're lucky, you get to make a 60-second movie, and
yeah.
that is just and then and maybe it's self justification, but it's like when you do and you do it well, you sort of feel like I did more with 60 seconds than you did with 2 hours.
Oh God, yes, it's so true.
Um,
Yeah.
doing that, I can't claim that I've got a spot that will make you cry, but there are those spots, right? And for my wife, it's like in 30 seconds, the tear, it's like, wow,
Look
wow.
at look at some of these Super Bowl spots,
Yep.
Yeah, man. Budweiser's built a brand around it. Puppies and babies are,
Little Clydesdales, yeah,
old Clydesdales. And, I look at what Dove has done,
sure.
Dove for Women, that brand. One
Yeah,
of the,
it's and when you see brilliance, and as you get
oh,
into the creative director level, you start to see just these little nuggets that are, wow, that is just such a powerful line or even a look, somebody delivers it, or when in the reverse, I uh, like working with kids sometimes, and you've
oh,
got these ideas of how great it's going to be, and then they don't deliver, and you're like, God, I don't know how to bring this out for the,
it's hard. I mean, there are certain things you have to like, you learn the hard way. Like, you're right. Anytime I've worked with kids, we've all had bad experiences because, they just don't have it, or they're having a bad day, or they're not good actors, or,
or those
you know,
damn puppies, they don't do what they're supposed to do.
I did, I did a spot a few years back with a penguin, And the penguin, the premise of the spot was the penguin was is needed to be escaping from the zoo.
Okay.
And we got a live penguin. It was really a cute little thing. And we let him go, and we're by the, right by the cage, and he like walks, and then he goes back in, he goes back. And then we like, all I needed was 3 seconds of him walking this
Yeah.
wonder, right? That's all I needed. And he'd take 2 steps and meander and two.
Throw and fish. You're
Well, okay, so this is funny. So the trainer or the animal handler was there, and she could tell we were frustrated. And she goes, "What are you guys trying to do? Like, what do you?" And we're like, "We need him to, like, if he could, like, run, But like, could we give him some fish, like you just said?" She said, "A penguin is not a dog." And I was like, "Oh my God." She
now
said,
you tell me.
they're not motivated by food.
Okay.
So she said, um, they're very curious. And that's what clearly, we got him out of his cage and he was just like, "Doo, doo, doo, doo." But it is true they mate for life. So her suggestion was
Great.
take the female, put the female in a crate, like in wherever direction you want him to
You'll
go,
go to her.
we'll put her off camera. And as soon as he sees her, he saw her and he took off
Perfect.
to her. So we were just all night long. It was a night shoot. We were just moving her in her crate all over the place.
Nice. Nice.
But these are little things you just would have never
You,
known.
you have to get the penguin on the set to find that one out. Hey,
The
let me.
other the other rule of thumb is if you're working with an athlete,
Yeah.
do everything you can to not give them a script.
Yeah.
Don't make them memorize or act. Don't make them act.
I want you to jump up and dunk the basketball. How about that?
Yeah, that's right. And if worst case, maybe I could have you do a voiceover.
Yeah. Yeah.
But man, the number of times people don't just never figure this out. They just assume, well, you're a professional athlete,
It's so
therefore
rare
you
to
can
find
also
somebody,
act.
yeah, who's got all those skills. Hey, so you've got a number of different qualities that are unique, I think, to a number of people. In that, so you make it into the agency world. You, as you said, even as an intern, and then beyond, you started to write some ads and got awarded. So you must have quickly learned this is kind of what award-winning work looks like, and I can replicate that. But then you've got the challenge of trying to sort of one up yourself or others in the firm. But you had the chance to partner with Rich Conkey. Tell me a little bit about making that kind of transition. Where were you?
So, well,
Had
Rich
you
and I
guys worked?
did,
Had you worked together then?
yeah, we worked together at Steve Eichenbaum's
So you
place.
were art director, copywriter team, and so you had plenty of late night beer meetings to start thinking about maybe we should go off on our own.
Well, it wasn't that actually. Again, remember in the upfront, I said that I sort of fell into a lot of these things. But so the Rich Conkey thing. I mean, I was thinking about this recently. In a 30-year career, I worked almost 15 years with Rich.
Yeah,
So like we crossed over for 4, maybe 3 at Steve Eichenbaum's place.
yeah,
And then I kind of got the itch to go somewhere else, but I was looking in Chicago, and I had an offer at the time. It was like the best agency in Chicago. It was called McConaughey Steinschmidt Brown, working with the great Jim Schmidt. And so I interviewed with them, and they offered me a job, and we were thinking about it. But at the same time, I had seen we had this very small, Kuro Eichenbaum, I think we had maybe 15, 16 people, and we got one ad age for the agency, and it had a route slip on it. And by the time it got to me, it was all dog-eared and torn up. But back in the day, there were want ads in the back, and there was an ad for a copywriter at Ogilvy, Hawaii. And I remember making a Xerox copy of this thing and bringing it home because I couldn't bring the magazine home. There were probably two other people yet to see it. Anyway, I sent them some work, and the McConaughey thing fell through. But what was interesting about that was we had kind of, my wife and I had already made up our minds. It's like, okay, we're willing to move.
If the right thing comes along, we'll go.
Yeah. And then the Ogilvy thing happened as well, and they offered to fly us out to Hawaii. And that's a whole nother podcast how that happened, but I won't bore you with that right now. But the point I'm making is I left. I took a job at Ogilvy, Hawaii. Rich stayed for probably another 6 months at Eichenbaum's place, and then he left to
You
go to
left with Steve.
Frankenberry.
Oh, okay.
And that's where he met Steve Hanneken.
Right.
And they were a good, really good team. And then, as I understand it, it was probably, if I could did the math, it was probably like 2 or 3 years together at
Yeah. It's a couple.
Frankenberry before they left to start their own. So it was Conky Kennedy.
Right.
And they were doing fabulous work. And Steve's
We
just,
remember when it turned to Conky Hanneken. It's like, I think you just reassemble the letters. That's all.
yeah. Well, Steve's a fabulous writer,
Yeah.
really good writer. And I remember just
Rich
marveling.
is as good an art director as you're going to find,
Yeah. And, so that was a good 1-2 punch. But when they decided to part ways, um, Rich and I were having lunch one day, and he said, "Hey, would you be interested in coming over here?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know." Now, at this point, I had already done my Hawaii thing. I went to Kramer Krasselt for 2 years, and then I was at Hoffman York. So this was
I forgot
probably,
that you had kind of a Milwaukee Grand Tour.
my God, when I tell people this, and when I even think about it myself, it sounds like I couldn't hold down a job, but I don't know. It's probably it works out to be the industry average of 3 years at every agency. So it wasn't all that outrageous, but
You look like an old stalwart compared to mine. My LinkedIn, I'm missing like three agencies in there because I'm like, this just looks so bad. I, I was with one agency for a month, and then I moved on because
yeah,
I felt like they didn't honor what they promised, and I'd gotten offered a better thing. So I just need the money. I'm
yeah,
sorry, I do. And I was having a good time, but it's
I
like,
get it. I
uh,
totally, we've all been there. So anyway, that's when the Cocky Hanneken thing happened. So, and that was a 10-year run.
yeah. So you all of a sudden your name's on the door.
Yeah.
How old are you when you accepted that with Rich?
I want to say 36.
Okay.
Yeah, it was 2007. No,
Yeah.
sorry. It was 1997.
Okay.
Pretty sure 97 or 98. And then I think we were not, yeah, because I think we closed our doors and went over to, well, Laughlin
Yep.
bought us. We merged with them, and that was 10 years later. So whatever year that was, 2007 or 8. And it was right around the time
So give
the
me
economic
just a
turndown.
smidge of a taste of the excitement of my name's on the door. See it says so.
You
Um,
know,
and the
what's
reality
interesting,
of now I got to run an agency and I got mouths to feed.
it's interesting. I've had a lot of people ask this question, how did you love owning part of a company? Were you part of, and I'm like, it was great, but if you have a list of 10 things to worry about when you work for someone,
Yeah.
you still have a list of 10 things to worry about. They're just different.
Mm.
Like I want to make sure I'm going to make payroll, and oh, we have a meeting with the healthcare guys coming in to talk about they're going to raise our premiums, or here's a financial guy coming. We want to offer a really good 401k for
Right.
people. Like these are things I never thought about when I worked for someone.
Yeah.
So everything shifts. You still have
And
a
I feel
lot.
like everybody in America should be an owner of a company at least for a little bit, just so they can get rid of the damn boss syndrome, where you're like, wait a second, I how much for healthcare?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and going down to the bank and writing a check, you know, to the state for payroll. You're like, wait, that was little Susie's bike, you know? It's like
Right. And or
that's
if the state calls you and they want to come in and just do an audit, like they just want
yes.
to do a random audit. We're not looking for anything. There's no red flags, but we it's just something we do. And it's like, oh my God. Like, and then they want to access your books and they want to look. It's just like
And realize that math major, how good of accountant you become.
that's
So
right.
yeah,
Oh my
that's
God.
the
So
truth.
yeah, I mean that was
You guys had a great run, and
oh my
obviously
God.
good enough that Laughlin said, why not just, and I assume, why not just bring you Sons of Bees in there?
Well, it's funny because we weren't looking to
Yeah,
sell. We actually we we could have made it.
yeah.
We would have had,
You
this
guys
was
were already making it in terms of the ad scene. You
well,
were as good a creative shop as there was in town.
well, thanks for saying that. I think the work was really stellar, and but I'll say this, it was 2008, 2007, 2008, like when the economic downturn was hitting.
Yeah,
And we've always said this. I know you get this, Mike. It's like if you want to know where the economy is going, I'm telling you, just look at what advertising budgets are. If they're being cut, it's be worried. If they're so we can usually tell like a year out, 6 months to a year,
yeah.
and then you can also predict the upturns when companies start spending again. But for us, we just people weren't paying their bills. They're like, we don't have the money,
Yeah.
and it was kind of tough. And we were talking about doing some layoffs. And that's when I was having lunch with Steve Laughlin one day, and he asked how things were going, and I'm like, we're kind of struggling with, full confidence. Clients are just telling us they don't have the money to pay the bills, and so he threw it out to me at lunch.
Hmm.
He goes, "Would you guys be open to a sale?" So it's funny. A lot of people think we closed, but we didn't really. Like we, almost everybody went over
Lifted.
there. And he got, I mean, but you think about it, Steve's a businessman. He's a
Yeah.
smart businessman. He got all this talent. He got all of our accounts. We just sort of shifted over there. And then we got to paint on a larger canvas, which was nice.
Yeah.
And work on, bigger brands that,
Did
bigger
it feel,
brands.
uh, with that, in essence, weight lifted, at least partially? Was it glorious for a little while?
Yeah, I'd say that's a great question. And it was because then all those things that you worried about, the
That's
paying
somebody,
the
that's somebody
bills,
else. They could do
that,
it.
oh, somebody else is going to handle it. Now I can just focus on being a writer again.
Do good work.
And it really was a great for, those first 2 years were amazing. I did some of the best work, and we did work on big brands. We worked on Cottonelle. Laughlin had a bunch of work from Kimberly Clark, Cottonelle and Kleenex. And I did some of my best work on those two brands. Working, Rich had left at that point, but, like maybe a year in. But I worked with Chad Nauta, who just was spectacular and still is just a great art director and a great human. And Michael Voivodich, and I mean, there was just so many great other talented people to work with. And um, but anyway, so that turned into 4 years of doing what we do, and back to the grind. Just here we are again.
Well, to be fair on time here, let me end with two things that I want to get to before we end. And the first
Mm.
one is to make sure that we plug you as an author and the home front and whatever's to come next, which is the other half of this equation where so many young creatives, yeah, I would like to run my own shop. And oh, by the way, I either want to be an author, a screenwriter, or a film director. So you chose author, and I think what was curious to me, although after reading it, less curious, um, that the book that you wrote, and I will make sure that there's a link so they can buy your book, and they damn well should buy your book. The home front is a book about a woman. The protagonist is a young woman. It's World War II, POWs in Wisconsin, a sort of forgotten story. But if I remember correctly, based on your
My mother influenced the story. Yeah.
grandmother's influence on this, of a, in essence, the framework of a real story that is there in front of you. Um, it didn't seem like the kind of book that you would write, and yet you do.
I've had a lot of people say that. And, you know, it was weird. As a kid, I remember my mom talking about when she was in a German POW camp. And I remember thinking,
What did you do, Mom?
you weren't in Belgium or Poland or what are you talking about? And she's like, no, no, no. It was Camp Grant outside of Rockford, Illinois, where she grew up. And there was a POW camp,
Yeah,
and it was an army base, but there were POWs there.
right.
And they lived in tents and they were brought over here from the fighting in Europe, primarily North Africa and part of Italy. And I just thought to myself, this is how come nobody knows about this? And I was like 15 years old. So this has always been percolating in my
That
head.
story was mulling around there for a while.
And I always thought, well, how cool would it be? Because, you know, every great story's got conflict. It's like, well, what if there was a woman whose husband he was fighting in Europe and she had these German POWs working in her farm.
Right.
And then she has an affair with one of the Germans,
Right.
like, you know, just to bake in some conflict. So that was always in my head. And I just finally one day I just like, I got to write this,
Yeah.
you know,
How
and
long did it take you? Not counting the percolation. When you finally said, "I'm going to write this."
probably about 6 years,
Huh.
you know, because I was working full time and I also, I think most of the work I got done when I was working in Chicago and I took the Amtrak every day because I took a job down there, but we didn't move. So I took the Amtrak every morning,
There's the opportunity. Yeah.
5 days a week in that quiet car.
Yep. Nice.
So, yeah, I got that done and I really sort of caught the bug and I've got like 10 more books in me that I wanted to get out. And that was my plan 3 years ago. When I left Hoffman York,
Yeah.
like this, you know, I punched a calculator. I think I can afford to pay the mortgage. And, um, you know, so my plan was to just write more books. And I finished the second one. It's hopefully going to be published soon, maybe in the next year, 6 months to a year. My publisher gave me notes.
Notes.
Yeah, so
That
notes.
sounds like a client who has concerns.
It's exactly what it is. So I've been addressing the notes. I've been ignoring others,
Yeah.
but anyway, so that was my plan. And then Marquette called and said, "Hey, we heard you're an unrestricted free agent. Would you be interested in teaching a class here full time?" Now, full disclosure, I was an adjunct
Yeah.
uh, for a period of time, so they kind of knew me. It wasn't just like calling me cold. And one thing led to another there. So now I'm in my third year at
So
Marquette.
now at graduate, you get to wear the special beanie and the robes and all that stuff. Is that you now?
I
Have to genuflect?
I absolutely make a point to go to graduation.
Nice.
I love it. It's just the best feeling in the world to be there and see these seniors, you know, and like these are your students. And as I get every year a new year under my belt, I get to know more and more and more of them. So anyway, the second book is it's I'd say it's done. I just have a few more, you know, rough edges to file off on. But so yeah, I really enjoy it. I think in many ways as a copywriter, we're storytellers anyway. we just do it in, let's say short storytellers in 30 and 60-second increments where you introduce characters, you introduce conflict, and you introduce a resolution,
Sure.
So writing a novel, I mean, it was historical fiction. The main character, even though I said it was inspired by my mother, I don't think this was my mom.
Right.
But
But you
there
could
were
place, but you could
a
be
lot of things in there
empathetic
that,
and place a woman in that position.
yeah, and I had a lot of women beta readers for me.
Right.
In order to make, like, I'm not going to give too much away here, but like the main character, if I figured like, well, if she's going to have a relationship with this German POW, I have to, I can't say I have to give her a reason, or permission, but I had to make her husband a real asshole.
Yeah, you did.
So, um, and that I think helps the reader feel a little bit more for her,
Right. Right.
But like, so he was a drinker and he would abuse her, and so I had a handful of women beta readers, and two of them said to me, they confided in me, they said, I've been in a relationship like this. And this is after reading like my first draft, and they were like, she's not behaving in
Right.
a way in which is real.
Okay.
So I got some fabulous advice from so many people. And that's it. The one piece of advice I would give anyone who is an aspiring writer: find some people you can trust who will tell you the truth,
Sure.
who you can say, listen, is this accurate? Is this right? Is this wrong? Point out where I get it wrong, because we've all been there. We've seen it. We've read books and seen films where things are wrong, and we just go, "Oh God, why they do it that way?" I think about my wife. She can't watch that show, House. You
Hmm.
know, she's a physical therapist, and it's a good show. It's well written, well acted. Hugh Laurie, I think, is the main guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Very
Her
legendary.
her background is she's a physical therapist, and she can't stand the fact that he walks with that cane and he has that limp. She's like, he's got the cane in the wrong hand.
Oh, yeah.
It
Yeah.
drives her crazy.
Right. I mean, it's like, I mean, almost any sports movie that you see, and when you see that the actor couldn't possibly, be that person, right? I mean, it goes all the way back to Gary Cooper playing Lou Gehrig, and there's no chance in hell he can even hit the ball, right? He just didn't
Right.
stand right. But anyway,
That's true. The beauty of editing. But
yeah, yeah.
I
Let
guess
me
my
do
my
one last thing before we part, and that is, so if you were a young student, or maybe better, somebody who's just in the industry and has some of these dreams of where they think they want to go, they've maybe been bitten by the bug to say, I heard about this 99, award show, and I'd love to have one of my pieces in there. How, if they want to move up the ladder, if they want to get the better job, if they want to be you, um, what should they be thinking? What should they be doing?
They need the reps. They need to get. I mean, honestly, I think they need to get the reps in. They need to do a lot of work. Even my students today, who I say like, yeah, I tell a story about when my creative director told me I need 100 headlines by noon. They're like, how many? I'm like, yeah, 100, and maybe you'd get one good one out of 100. But that's how you get good. It's you just put in the time, you get the reps. I would say they say, well, how many campaigns should I put in my portfolio? I'm like, a minimum of 5, but that means you're going to have at least worked on 10,
Yeah,
because you're not putting everything in that book. So I like to remind them of that. It's like, this is your highlight reel.
yeah.
Every athlete,
Yeah, for a football player, just getting the 3 yard hitch probably isn't super impressive.
yeah, they're not putting every play in that reel for someone to draft them or recruit them.
Yeah,
So just remember that, this is your best work, not your all of your work.
Yeah.
So I think the reps, I think being open to, you got to work hard. You've got to try to, the other thing I get this like epiphany by some of these students. I'm like, think of yourself as a product. How do you stand out? What do you do? Um, like do write a creative brief on yourself. Let that be your resume. Like what is the thing that you as a young person, like how do you separate yourselves from, and there's, it's being on a college campus, it's interesting because I have a class of freshmen, but I have a class of seniors, and I tell the seniors, I'm like, you got a lot of friends here. In that final week of school, you're going to be hugging each other and going, "Oh, friends for life, love you, bro." Like, oh, there's going to be a lot of this. I'm like, the next week, guess what you call those friends? Competitors.
Yeah.
And they're just like, oh. I'm like, yeah, you're all sending resumes
It's a
into
big
the
job.
same companies. So how are you going to stand out?
Yeah.
And so you need to figure that out. I think finding a good mentor is critically important too. If there's someone you can trust, somebody in the business, do informational interviews. I'm a huge fan of those. Um, Pick the brains of people. You're not asking for a job. You're asking for someone's opinion.
Yeah.
And those things really help a lot too. And they just have to get over this fear factor. They're so like, oh, they're going to think I'm weird or I'm stalking them. I'm like, no, we know you're a student. We get it.
Yeah.
So I think that is those things are, there's probably 10 more that I could name, but those are probably the big ones. Put
Yeah.
in the reps is probably the most important.
No, I think that's true almost everywhere, right? You gotta
Yeah.
just learn so much, and from the failures, right? To be sure, but it's also nice every once in a while you win, and you're like, that one.
It's the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hour rule. I
Yep.
mean, it's as much as you don't
I just
like.
picked up. Did you know he has a new book?
Yes, and I can't wait to read it.
I picked it up at Target. I was still looking to see if Home Front was on a Target shelf, but
Yeah.
thank you. Hey, I really appreciate it, Dave, and neat to hear how things, kind of work their way up and through as we go through it. But I'm so happy that you're enjoying professorhood or whatever it may be. But and I can't wait for the next book to come through, and make sure you follow every single one of those notes. I'm sure
Oh, of
they're great.
course.
I'm sure they're perfect.
I've got notes. Yeah, just like clients got concerns, but I'm working on them, and yeah, I'm hoping maybe within the next 6 months to a year it'll be
Excellent.
finalized.
We'll look for it.
Well, this was fun, Mike. Thanks for the opportunity.
I'm glad that you could, and we'd love to see you show your face inside this community. I'm hoping to grow it to 1,000 people. Right now, it's like 30 people. But to your students, it's free. Come on in and learn from guys such as yourself, as well as just other people who are in the same boat. And
I think that what you're
hopefully
doing
it'll be a
is
neat idea that grows.
it's so fabulous. It's such a great idea. Yeah.
There we go.
Good
All
service.
right.
All right, Mike. Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye bye.